What's going on, everybody? This is James Grandmaster Facts Boyce, and this is another episode of the Facts Project. Today, very, very special guest, Anthony Piper, creator of Trill League. Appreciate you being here. Also, writer and artist for Marvel, and does a boatload of other things as far as character designs for Netflix and many other animation studios. I appreciate you being here. This is big for me.
Hey, man, I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely, man. So to get right into it, man, if we want to come out clear, Trill League, of course, being when it first dropped in about like 2014, if I'm correct.
Yep.
I remember the old days of Instagram when people were pretty much putting their books out for the first time. It was probably one of the first indie books that I would say a lot of people drew their interest from. Mm-hmm. Because of the art style, and pretty much, if I want to take it incorrectly, because they were seen as caricatures or parodies of a lot of DC characters. If you care to elaborate, what was the inspiration of behind you creating Trill League for the first time?
All right, so with Trill League was kind of like a lightning in a bottle incident. You know, it wasn't anything that I had actually planned out. Essentially what had happened was, prior to me creating Trill League, I was an aspiring artist trying to, find my way into the animation industry and the comic industry. However, I was just doing like a lot of independent work, doing a lot of mixtape cover work, illustrations and stuff of that sort. And I won't get too much into the details of what led me to like kind of being in like a really low spot, but basically I had moved to California. Things didn't kind of pan out the way I thought they were going to, as far as me pursuing a career in the industry. And then I had to end up moving back to Chicago. And so I was hustling, from home. Basically, I had lost my car, lost a bunch of stuff. The only thing I came back with from California back to Chicago was my computer monitor, my computer, and my drawing tablet, and a couple of clothes. So I was intent, to hustle. And so essentially I had got a project. I got a project around the time. And mind you, so at this low point, the reason I had to bring that up was because I was watching a lot of stand-up comedy at the time. So that was kind of, bringing my mood up and stuff. So anyway, I was waiting for a project at the time. The project didn't come through. So I was like, all right, man, I got some free time on my hands. I'll try to draw something. So at first I initially had drew Marvel characters in like hip hop attire. Just kind of remixing them. And then I was like, well, this is kind of too easy. I was like, everybody kind of does that. I was like, let me do DC characters, because I think DC characters kind of exist in a different realm than Marvel characters in terms of alternate artistic interpretations, right? So when it came to DC, I was like, well, you could put them in hip hop attire, but I was like, these characters, in terms of their designs and stuff like that, it doesn't really work in terms of putting, Bruce Wayne in hip hop attire, at least from my standpoint. So I was like, yo, let me just turn him black instead. So the first thing I did was I turned Robin, who was one of my favorite characters at the time. Well, not at the time. I mean, he's always been one of my favorite characters. I had drew him as a black kid with a high top fade. Just had him doing like some funny stuff that black kids do. And I didn't think anything of it, posted it online like I usually did with most of my work, and woke up that morning and it just happened to go crazy viral. Like, it got the most shares of any of my work that I've ever done before. So I was like, oh, okay. I was like, people responding to this. I was like, people like this, they were like, this is kind of humorous. So the next character I did Green Lantern, but I did him as a pimp, and I had him, doing, the activator curl, one of his projections. I had him doing it, the slap, the pimp hand. And that went even more viral. So I was like, oh, okay. I was like, I got something right now. So I just decided to, because of how people responded to it, I just kept building upon it. And, from there, I just kind of filled out the whole cast, kind of just taking inspiration from, black film, black comedy and stuff like that, personalities that we knew and stuff of that sort, and just interjecting them into, these characters that we knew. And that just kind of was the genesis of it all.
Man, look, I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to say it again. This was the old Instagram. The place where basically you actually had a little bit of time to grow. You didn't have to worry about algorithm or anything.
Right.
Pretty much everything was kind of organic.
Yeah.
So when you started putting all these character designs for Trill League up, shit caught like wildfire for a lot of us. So especially a lot of us that read comics. So when I say it was like one of the first ones that I got to got to look upon and have like something favorable independently aside from the big two, like that meant something. And not opposed to the fact that it was a black comic book creator behind all of it in the landscape of it. So then like we were looking at it and all of a sudden like episode 1 was going to drop through the first Kickstarter. And I remember me and a friend of mine were basically looking to get it for the first time, and we were like, we didn't really like read graphic novels. We were like, we were like almost not really like opposed to them or anything. We're so used to 22 issue comics, single issue comics all the time that we never really like picked up a graphic novel for the first time. So it was like, damn, like there's so much in here, and the thing is, it's funny. There's a lot of dark humor in it. The artwork's dope, and it's done independently. So it brought on a new sense of structure to where you felt like you loved it and you needed to support it.
I appreciate that, man. Yeah, I mean, I mean, the whole process of creating Trill League has just been kind of me discovering, a lot of my interests that I've had as far as artistic pursuits. Because I mean, I grew up in a living color era,
Yeah.
and I mean, anybody who grew up in that era, you read my comics, you can kind of see it, what I'm saying, in terms of like how I arrange skits and stuff like that. Of course, the Def Comedy Jam, Martin and stuff like that. So, man, when I was creating these characters, I was kind of putting a humorous spin behind them. But then when I started to kind of write these little one-page comics, that's really kind of how these characters started to become more fleshed out, and the comedy that was derived from them. I felt like every character kind of brought like a certain flavor to Trill League, because I kind of felt like, Sparrow, at the name, at the time his name was Trill Robin. I felt like, he kind of brought that, sort of immature, childish sort of comedy that you get from like, Bart Simpson, Riley, Stewie, Cartman and stuff like that. And then, you had Black Man, who I felt kind of made the series more political.
Yeah.
In the sense that, the social commentary that we could talk about, with racism and stuff. And then Big Banks, he kind of brought the hip hop edge to it because, I was bringing in, you never seen, a music producer, as a villain, for a series. So I just kind of felt like all these characters kind of, I brought them in and they just gave this series a different flavor, to make it something special. And when they came to episode 1, particularly, so I had did that Kickstarter with the intent just to do one comic. At first I was planning to do just, a standard 20-page comic. However, a couple of things transpired once I had moved back to California. One being that I got in contact with a brother named Jermaine Johnson, and he's now my manager. And he was the one who made the deal go down with 50 and Quibi and Lionsgate. But when I first met him, when I moved out here, he asked me one thing. He was like, have you ever thought about writing for TV? And I was like, it never crossed my mind. I never thought about writing for television at all. Even though when I was younger, I used to always think about skits and stuff of that sort, watching, like I said, The Living Color, Mad TV, Saturday Night Live and stuff like that. And I used to always, think of skits and, talk to my friends about them, like, yo, man, we, acted this out and did this. But I never knew how to pursue that. It never crossed my mind. And so when he asked me that, I was kind of like, oh, okay, if you think I can write, And at the time, I didn't know anything about the company that he worked for, which was 3 Arts. And that, I had went back home and researched them. I was like, oh, so this is the company that, produces Insecure, it produced Martin, it produced Silicon Valley. So I was like, oh, maybe, I'm like, if somebody at this company is thinking that I could write, maybe it's something I should take serious.
Right.
So, episode 1 particularly, I started because I had produced episode 0. And I still had 2 more books, I believe, because that was part of my stretch goals. Was I think like 7,000 I hit, I was going to do another book. So I had 2 more books on the line, but then when he had put that in my head about writing, I was kind of like, oh, maybe I should pursue this television writing thing. So over the course of those 3 years, I had, a lot of stuff had transpired. I had started working for studios. I was starting to get all these jobs. I was writing for Marvel and stuff. However, I started to think like a television writer.
Mm-hmm.
I was starting to study TV and stuff like that, and how to structure scenes, how to get in and out of a scene and stuff like that. So essentially what I was doing was I was taking all my, taking everything it is I was observing about television writing, and I was putting it in episode 1.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why that book is so long.
Right. Okay. Dope. So Sparrow, Black Mane, Swole Mane, Wandisha, Tam Tam, basically Trill League, looking like of course a caricature of the Justice League.
Mm-hmm.
Now, essentially, there was a bunch of pieces that were given towards the Kickstarter. Like I remember there was even a web comic that was around that as well, correct?
Around a Kickstarter?
Yeah.
I had a few web comics out. I had a couple of 1-pages, which I call my drops, which are like, the little 1-page comics that I do. Sometimes I'll put like, celebrities in there, of that sort, but it's not like a full fleshed out story. It's just kind of like me, taking a joke and putting in a couple of panels.
Okay, got you. So essentially, right after episode 1, the adaptation came. So it was like 2019. Maybe like 4 years after we started to get our first glimpses of Trill League. Essentially, 50 Cent being the executive producer. Quibi was, of course, going to adapt Trill League into a animated series, and pretty much we were going to see Trill League on not only on the TV, but we're going to see it on our phones, because Quibi was, of course, digitized to where you could watch programs throughout your phone or your tablets or anything like that. They were more so formatted in that way. So us seeing that for the first time was kind of like, also in that same breath, the first time that we saw a Black independent comic book creator adapting something based off an independent comic book publishing company. So it was like, in essence, it was a big win. We were like, damn, I'm gonna see. For one, comic book readers like myself, we were like, damn, they got him, so we ain't gonna get episode 2. You know what I'm saying? But essentially, we was happy nonetheless, because okay, we going to see it on TV. It's gonna be like our version of Boondocks.
Mm-hmm.
Boondocks being early 2000s, and we're gonna get Trill League basically in these latter end of like the late 2000s. And essentially, Quibi unfortunately folded,
Mm-hmm.
which then led to us, which then we saw the CU get picked up by Marvel, and it was like, fuck, we're never going to get Trill League episode 2. Oh shit, I'm sorry. See, it got me dropping everything. I was like, damn, we are never going to get episode 2. That's how mad we were. So like, in the end, it was like, it was something that we were looking forward to, but then again, it was something that like, essentially we were happy for you, because as a creator, we saw the fact that you were going to write for Marvel, and the adaptation, even though it fell through, it was there. So it was like it was going to happen in the long run anyway. So you started to do character design for animation companies. You started doing stuff for the New York Times. You started doing stuff for Netflix. And at the end of the day, it was like, okay, he's been writing and doing artwork. It's not like the guy's not busy. So it works out on all ends. But do you feel, in the midst of all this, did you know that episode 2 was actually going to happen?
I always intended for episode 2 to come out. However, I didn't necessarily know if I would have the time to do it, just because I wasn't, I wasn't sure of, how much of my time was going to be taken up
Mhm.
in regard to doing a series, as far as being a writer, probably, having playing a hand, in animation production too. So I just wasn't sure how much of my time was going to be taken out because, of course, once you release something in a particular format, it's kind of hard to go back. I mean, that's kind of one of the things it is that I won't say I regret
Mhm.
in terms of the format of that book, because I think, I think the format of that book, episode 1 particularly, it did, it exposed a lot as far as like, my style of writing, what I'm saying, my ability to, mix in, comedy with, mystery and intrigue, and, what
Yeah.
I'm saying, go from, lighthearted to dark in tone, but the only problem is that, people gonna want more of that. So it's kind of like
True.
I can't go to a 20-page issue, which,
No.
would definitely be easy for me to, recreate, and do in my spare time. But it's like, people gonna want another 60 page. They're gonna want another story in that format.
It's
So
true.
that was the only difficult part. But yeah, I mean, I always intended to do another book. I would love to finish out this story. I don't necessarily know if, because we are pitching the series again.
Right.
The series, and this time, it won't be on a smaller platform. It's going to be, a half an hour, series on a big network.
Mm.
So it's like that's going to take up more time. So I'm not necessarily sure, if I will be allotted to finish it up, which I've been kind of scouting out other artists to kind of collaborate with to help me
Okay.
finish it up. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it was ample time for me to, just get back in it. Cause it's been a while. Like you said, I was working for Marvel, I was working for studios, I was doing a lot of freelance work. And I was kind of like, I'm ready to get back to my characters and stuff. So
yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like, these are my kids.
exactly.
And even though I'm doing all this work, probably doing like landmark work to where, you're doing Spider-Man, you're doing Jean Grey, you're doing Guardians of the Galaxy, you're doing Marvel voices, you're doing all these great Marvel banner characters and also their titles. But then again, what has basically been happening lately with like the appearance of like digital formats like Substack and even webtoons and everything like that. You got a lot of like creators and authors from the big two that are like jumping in to make their own independent comics. It's like it's almost like the mainstream guys are like jumping into indie for the first time. And more power to them, because I'm pretty sure that's what they've always wanted to do in the long run. It might be a dream come true to do Spider-Man. But then again, if I'm able to create the characters that I've created, like literally something that was in my head that I was able to put the page, and I put that out to something that everybody loves, I can imagine, what that feels like, as opposed to like, drawing one of your favorite characters that maybe inspired you as a child, if it's something that you created yourself.
Yep. Yeah, man.
Definitely.
I mean, I think it's a great time for, being a creator, just because of social media, and the ability to, kind of generate an audience of your own for your material. Because I mean, that was the biggest thing that was holding people back from doing that back in the day anyway, was the fact that how was you going to get your material out? You had to have, a lot of money in order to print your stuff, because that was the only way, people could consume your material. So now that, we have the internet and social media and stuff like that, it's just so much easier. And I mean, I think it's proper time too, just because of the fact that, I mean, we've had these characters, that we seeing on the screen right now for, 60, 70 years, and I mean, granted, it's a lot of stories that need to be told. However, because they're, controlled by these corporations, there's only so many things it is that you can do with these characters, because they're going to protect, their financial interests. So, if you want to start getting into, darker stories, more adult themed stories and stuff like that, what I'm saying? They're not going to let you do that with those characters.
It's true.
So it's like it's perfect timing, man, for independent creators to go out there and start creating stuff. Plus, Hollywood's always looking for more stories. I mean, the whole comic pipeline has sort of become, a way to sell stories now, which is one thing that I try to tell a lot of artists, especially ones who can write. I'm like, yo, put the time into creating your, into fleshing out your story, man. You don't even have to have any intent to finish it.
Yeah, it's true.
You know, I mean, that's what they're looking for. That's what a lot of, you know, writers and creators are doing, you know, and even people who work in Hollywood who can't sell their stuff, you know, to the studios, they'll hire someone to produce the comic in order to go out and sell it
Mm,
because it's easier for them to kind of see the vision. You
right.
know, as opposed if I'm just giving you a sheet of paper telling you what my story is, you might not be able to see it. However, you know, if I put some pictures behind it, you know, and I can also get some sort of, you know, response
Hmm.
from, you know, the people, you know, that might entice the studio to be like, oh, okay, now I see what it is you're trying to build. Okay, you know, all right, here's your budget.
Right.
So perfect timing, man, to start, you know, just, you know, all those ideas you got in your head, man, flesh them out.
So what is your opinion on the scale of like independent books that are getting adapted lately?
What's my opinion on them?
Mhm.
Well, hey, more power to the creators, man. Only thing I, you know, I will tell people is just get kind of knowledgeable about how a lot of this stuff works. You know, go in with the lawyer, you know, um, just, you know, get business wise to a lot of this stuff because I went in. So one of the things is that I went in not knowing was about this thing called a loan out, right? And essentially a lot of writers and producers, a lot of people who work in Hollywood know about this concept called loan out.
Mhm.
And essentially what it is you're building a company that the studio kind of, you know, basically, you know, they pay the company for your services. And
Mhm.
this is a way that you kind of not avoid taxes, but you kind of don't take as big of a hit on your taxes. So when I was starting to get paid for my writing services, man, I was paying like 50% taxes, you
Wow.
know? Yeah, because you know, my in terms of how they were paying me, my checks looked like that's how much I was making per week. You
Mm.
know, when it looks like you're making 20,000 per week, you know what I'm saying? If you add that up, that's a million. That means you're, you know, you're making $1 million+ salary,
Mhm.
you know, which wasn't what I was making. I wasn't making $1 million, but that's how they were looking at me. So I was getting taxed at the highest bracket.
Oh.
So, you know, I wasn't taking that, I wasn't bringing that much money home. Well, I was bringing more than I was normally doing on the comic stuff, but not nearly as much as I should have been.
Mhm.
So, you know, I mean, I got it back toward the tail end at the end of the year. You know, I did my you know, refund and stuff like that. But you know, that's just one aspect of the game that it is that, you know, you should be knowledgeable about when you start getting into, you know, this business stuff, because a lot of these people, they're not going to tell you. You know what I'm saying? Like
Mhm.
Hollywood is just kind of like, you know, it's a well-oiled machine that just keeps moving, keep churning, and they're not going to tell you these things. So you have to become knowledgeable about it. So, you know, also get your stuff copywritten, you know, get your IPs copywritten, man. You know, trademark isn't necessarily as important, but you know, that might be another aspect that you might want to do. You know,
Mhm.
it's a lot of things that, you know, you should just be wise about. And I had to go through the ringer. I'm still learning to this day,
Yeah.
but you know, if you can find somebody that will teach you, you know, about how to do business with the IPs, man, you know, you'll go in a lot better.
Mm. How do you feel about the move that comics are like being created more digitally? Is it a good move rather than print, or would you are you in agreement that the digital wave of comics as opposed to physical prints is like is a good thing?
I mean, from an environmental standpoint, I mean, of course, yeah, I think digital is a
Hmm.
lot better. But I mean, some people, you know, they prefer print. I mean, for certain books, I still prefer print.
Right.
You know, if it's from one of my favorite artists, I'm definitely going to want, you know, the printed version as opposed to the digital version, especially when it comes to graphic novels as opposed to singles. You know, I'm more likely to get the digital of a single
Hmm.
and then the print of the graphic novel if, you know, I want to have the actual book.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's a good thing, man. I mean, you know, the less trees we cutting down. Um, you know, I used to be a collector, and I mean, I'm still kind of a bit of a collector, but you know, after a while having all those books, man, they just take up space. So, you know,
Hmm.
just being
Yeah.
able
True.
to, you know, read your stuff digitally,
You saw what
man.
just happened.
Yeah, exactly.
So, describe to me your relationship co-writing this with Jamil Salim.
Okay, so me and Jamil aren't working with each other now.
Hmm.
Um, But as far as the experience that I had with him, man, I mean, I wish he was still on board for the series. I think, you know, what we created was great. And I think, you know, with the bigger budget, now that, you know, we were going to have access to a bigger budget and more time, I think what we could have created was going to be, you know, even more awesome than what we created for Quibi. But, you know, I learned a lot from him. You know, he was already an experienced writer in Hollywood. This was my first time writing, you know, so he was teaching me a lot of the ropes. You know, but we kind of had, you know, we had some kind of similar comedy styles.
Yeah.
In some ways they were similar, in some ways they were different. But you know, we were both, you know, from similar backgrounds, you know, black men around the same age, you know, kind of, you know, inspired by the same things and stuff of that sort. So, you know, we kind of mesh well because that's one of the things about this industry is that there actually aren't a lot of black men working in animation, you know, who write for animation, which was one of the struggles that we kind of had was, you know, like when we had to kind of find a co-writer for me to work with, it was like, well, you want someone of a similar background who kind of will understand these characters, you know, what the world it is that you're trying to build.
Right.
And that was difficult to find. It was like, yo, there aren't a lot of black men writers. Well, first off, there aren't a lot of black writers in Hollywood, but particularly ones who, you know, had a love and understanding of animation. And he was just one of them, you know, like when we did my interview process with, you know, Carl Jones, who's behind the Boondocks, he was one of the options. And I had already previously spoken to him about possibly coming on board because I'm a big fan of, you know, his comedy style. And I think, you know, we have a lot of similarities as well in terms of like, you know, what the things it is that we think are funny and stuff like that. But he had already got picked up for the last OG, I believe.
Oh, okay.
So he was unavailable at the time. And so we had a couple of writers come in and, you know, much respect to the writers who had came on to interview for the process. But, you know, the biggest thing for me was that I did want someone who was black, who could understand these characters because I wanted these characters to have, you know, an authentic voice behind them, you know, especially like a character like Black Man, you know what I'm saying, who's very, you know, non-PC with his message. You know, I want him to be like super raw with how he feels about racism, whether, you know, you can think of him as being right or wrong about it, but I want him to speak truthfully about how he feels about, you know, race relations. And, you know, sometimes that might be, I won't say that some white writers are not against it, but, you know, I think sometimes it can come from an inauthentic place because, you know, they aren't the ones on the, you know, bearing the consequences from it. So, you know, I want us to, you know, like I said, just have a level of authenticity with what it is that I wanted this series to represent. So Jamil was the best option for that. But, you know, things kind of, as we went out, we were going to take it out to pitch last year. And, you know, he ended up getting, well, I won't put his business out there, but he ended up, you know, something better for him transpired and he had to leave off. You know, but it worked out for best for the both of us. Cause I mean, my co-writer now is great. You know, I don't want to spoil it because I'm sure they're going to want to put the presser out there and stuff like that. But, you know, I've been working with her for the last about 6-7 months now.
Okay.
And, you know, we just been preparing it. And I mean, you know, her father was a Black Panther. You know, she has some, you know, tenure in the industry and stuff like that. She comes from some well-received television series out there. So, you know, I think it worked out for the best for everyone.
Dope. So how much has Chicago influenced the landscape of Trill League?
Man, I mean, Chicago is all in Trill League, you know. I mean, you know, Chicago, growing up on the south side of Chicago, man, you know, it was definitely and still is today one of the most segregated metropolises in America, you know. And so when I grew up, all I saw was Black people. You know, that's all I grew up around, man. I didn't, you know, I can't say anything about New York because I mean I've been there, but I didn't grow up in New York, you know. But even out here in Cali, you know, you see a lot of different faces, you know. Even, you know, if you're in the poorest areas, you know, you're gonna see a lot of different color faces. In Chicago, that's not the case. You know, all I saw was Black people, you know. And so that's what I always felt that when I created a world, I wanted only, majority Black people to occupy that world. And anything it is that I always imagined was always going to be, full of Black people, because that's the world it is that I grew up in. The different personalities, different characters and stuff of that sort. So, even the house that I had on the culturally insensitive cover, that was the house that I grew up in, on 75th and Kenwood. So I just wanted to bring that sort of, and I don't necessarily think it's unique to Chicago, because I think any, hood in America, has that sense of just, being surrounded by Black people and stuff like that. But that's what I wanted Trill League to be, was just, a world where, you got the corner stores, you got the food and liquor stores, you got your cats hanging out on the corner, just chilling, talking, people chilling on their porch. That's what I want Trill League to be, but in a superhero sense,
Oh, yeah. So as far as the reading order that a lot of people should know when they're getting this book for the first time, there's the culturally insensitive guide, which is basically kind of like the source book. And it's also the hub for episode 0.
Yep.
Then you have episode 1, but it comes with a bonus story called White Noise, which leads right into episode 2. So when you talk about like your TV writing, is White Noise the bonus story that's after episode 1? Is it sort of, I guess, like a cliffhanger, or it's just something that you or is it like an Easter egg that you need to have in order to read episode 2? That's basically the Kickstarter's about.
Yeah, I believe you have to read it, and I'm gonna make that available for it, because it was sort of the way I inserted it was sort of like back in the day, like when you got a CD and you would listen to it, and what I'm saying, it would be some space like after you listen to the last track, and
bonus track,
you just kind of hear some white noise, and then all of a sudden that track, like, yo, where this come from? That was how I formatted that book. What I'm saying, like those 6 white pages in between. What I'm saying, when you get to the end, you just like, yo, why did he put these white pages? And then it's like, oh, it's another bonus, it's a story at the end of it. So I was kind of creatively trying to recreate that experience you get with a bonus track on a CD, in a graphic novel. But that story, yes, you do need to. You don't have to go into it knowing that story, but it's best that if you do, because the whole story is built on Banks and Swole's relationship, their business relationship, and why it is he's trying to take out this team. And that was kind of like the beginning of, like, you understand that he signed that contract, he was signing his life, he was signing his life away in some regards. Which some people kind of maybe correlate to what it is I'm doing with Trill League. So, which wasn't purposefully, which wasn't perfect. It just happened to be a happy correlation. Right. But yeah, you probably do need to read that, or understand it, because the episode 2 starts straight off with a couple of months after that deal goes down, and what starts to be the fracture of that business deal.
Right. So when we're looking at big banks, of course, there's an inspiration behind the character. He's a super producer who has a lot of money and does a shitload of endorsements. And if you're not cognizant of it, you would just think it's making the band and he's Diddy and Trill League is the band.
In some ways, yeah. Yeah, you can think of it like that, man. Yeah, that was my inspiration behind it, man. It was a lot of things that went into it. As far as, one, I always just had a love for music. I wanted to be, before I got back into comics, I wanted to be a music producer. For like 6-7 years. I kind of messed around with making beats and stuff like that. Didn't go anywhere with it, but that was my intent, was to produce music and stuff. So I wanted to bring that element into the series. And then when I was creating the villains, I took Lex Luthor, and I was kind of like, oh, it's like, all right, well, how would I spend Lex Luthor? I was like, who would be, the appropriate businessman? And I was like, oh, what I'm saying? Like, yeah, Diddy, So I just kind of built on that, man, and I made him a little bit more. I can't say if I made him a little bit more nefarious because Diddy has Diddy has done some dark shit.
This
But
is
yeah,
true.
he was the main inspiration behind it. The saboteur of a lot of careers. So you can kind of think of Banks in the same sense. Like
Yep.
how's he gonna destroy these heroes? And I think it was on some humorous shit, some hip hop shit, but I think it also, over the years, just as I've, grown up and had a chance to, deal with the entertainment industry and stuff like that, I think it's going to be a message embedded in there as far as, the the preying of the preying on, I should say, of young black artists,
Yeah.
who come from nothing, and these business people who take advantage of them. Um, I think that's going to be a dope analogy that I'm going to insert into this whole story about that. So
Yeah, because essentially there is a story behind the story. Like pretty much when Trill League is being assembled, Big Banks is looking at the group as an opportunity. Like so especially his relationship with Swole Man, because
yeah,
he gets him to endorse Swole Aid. So
yeah,
it's kind of like it's definitely on the appeal of him selling Ciroc out
yeah, exactly,
with every
yeah,
artist that was out.
yeah,
So
exactly.
essentially with that deal falling through, Banks is pretty much I'm going to guess in episode 2, you know, it's kind of like he's thinking of a way to get payback for the failed business deal that happened with Trill League, and
Mhm.
is ultimately trying to find out ways to insert himself internally from the inside out and just like cause their demise.
Exactly. I mean, and I want to. The thing is I also like writing villains as well, because I like getting deep into those characters' minds, and I want to also talk about it from the perspective of a young black man who built himself from the ground up, from poverty and invested all his money into this deal that was going to be lucrative not only for him or maybe his community too, we'll
Yeah.
see, but he banks everything on this deal and somebody backs out of it.
Hmm.
And how would you feel from that perspective? It's like, yo, you
Right.
you spent your entire life building yourself up to be successful, and you go into a deal trusting somebody that they were going to hold their end of the bargain and they pull out,
Mm,
and it causes you to lose everything.
right.
How would you feel? So that's the perspective that I want to go at it from, and it's kind of just like I always want to kind of keep it gray as far as like, do I don't necessarily know he is a bad guy, but I
Yeah.
don't want you to just see him purely as a villain. I want you to see him as somebody, who's human, and it's kind of like, all right, if somebody, messed me over like that,
Hmm.
or what I do, but he's human and they superheroes. So it's like, how is he gonna do that? And I think that's really
Right.
gonna be the magic of his character and show, how smart, of a person he is, his business sense. He
Mhm.
knows, like, all right, I can't go toe to toe with Superman. So how am I gonna take him out?
Right. Because he's also somebody that pretty much put all his backing into him, put all his chips on the table, and inevitably it kind of messed up his reputation.
Yeah.
So if you do look at it from that point of view, it definitely makes sense.
Yeah.
Even if it's coming from a villainous background, because of course every villain's got a diabolical backstory. So that might be the move.
Yep. Yeah, man, it's gonna be interesting, man. Like I say, I think a lot of people when they first came on a Trill League back in 2014, 2015, they kind of thought it was like, this is kind of childish, like, but I think the people who, looking for stuff that's a little bit deeper, that's a little bit of a sort of mirror to a lot of the social conversations that take place in the community. Cause black people tend to, we like deep shit,
It's true.
and I think episode 2 is definitely going to flesh out a lot more of a lot of the conversations that are taking place with, as far as like you know, people who come from sort of, you know, what we deem bad and, you know, illegal um, backgrounds and stuff like that, you know, the stuff that they do for the community, you know, does that still make them bad? You know, somebody like Jay-Z, you know, somebody who
Yeah.
sold drugs. But, you know, look at all the opportunities that he's providing for, you know, young black men and women, you know,
Yeah. That's
stuff like that.
totally true.
Yeah.
So amidst Trill League, there's still also the opportunities where you, of course, are still working with Marvel. Do you care to expand on like the characters in which you want to dive into, still working with Marvel all the while putting out Trill League?
So with Marvel, I mean, I've been working with Marvel since 2016, 17.
Mm,
My first project with them was the Ghost Rider special that I co-wrote with Method Man.
mm.
And that was my first project that I illustrated, and I just wrote the dialogue for the script. He already had the story, you know, arranged and all that. I just kind of wrote in the dialogue for the characters. Well, from then I started writing, you know, for X-Men. I was writing for Guardians of the Galaxy for their digital line. And I had took a little bit of a hiatus. Uh, my editor at the time, who was the X-Men editor, he was an assistant editor on X-Men. He had recommended me to Nick Lowe to write for Miles.
Mm.
And nothing transpired at the time.
Yeah.
And it went like 2-3 years before I had heard. Well, we had spoke, but nothing basically transpired. And then he reached back out to me to illustrate. I can't remember what issue it was, but it was basically a special, I think, where Miles got his new costume.
Hmm.
And I was to do like a little small story. And he was like, well, you know, this is a perfect opportunity for us to start working with each other. So from there, I wrote for Ben Reilly in a Spider-Man Devil Rain crossover event.
Hmm.
I did a What If for Miles, and then I did another digital issue for Peter Parker. But that was it. I wasn't doing anything long term or anything, you know, in depth. I was just doing like these kind of like one shots and stuff like that, which has been pretty much the extent of most of the stuff I've done for Marvel, outside of the run that I did for Guardians of the Galaxy, which I think I did 10 issues
Hmm.
of. But other than that, yeah, it's usually just like little one shots that I do, nothing long term, because I haven't pitched anything to Marvel. Um, if I were to pitch something to Marvel, I can't necessarily say what character I want to do. I Patriot, but I would have to see what Patriot is at in order
Hmm.
to like kind of come up with a story for him. And you know, it's a question if I wanted to do the art as well, how long would that run be and stuff like that. But yeah, I just, you know, I kind of just take like little small jobs from Marvel here and there.
Understood.
Yeah.
Now, then I'll ask you this: is there any characters that you would, or characters within Trill League that you would deem as fan favorites that could more so probably carry on a single issue series by themselves, if there was anybody?
I mean, man. So in terms of like fan favorites, it's Sparrow then Wandisha. Like, yo, those are people's two favorite. I think Black Man could carry a series by himself as well. But yeah, those two characters are like, you know, the most beloved. You know, I get a lot of love from the sisters that say, you know, they've never seen a Black woman like that, you know what I'm saying, kind of, you know, put in a superhero role.
This
You
is
know,
right.
I mean, granted, I mean, you know, we got Storm, I think that, and who, Vixen, who else
Yeah,
we got?
Vixen, and recently Nubia, which is
And no
basically the Black Wonder
like
Woman.
Wonder Woman, yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, I mean, we don't have that many Black women, you know, superheroes, but you know, one that represents, you know, Black women, you know what I'm saying, and some of the humorous ways it is that Black women can be, you know what I'm saying, as their authentic selves, man. You know, we don't have that. You know, they're mostly like kind of like very regal esque,
Yeah.
you know, in a
Yeah.
sense. So I get a lot of love, you know, saying for One Disha, and then you know, of course, Sparrow, just because he's the face of the series as well. With Black Mane, he's gonna start. You know, I haven't really fleshed him out fully to what it
Mhm.
is that he can be. I can tell you this: when I worked on the Quibi series, he really got more fleshed out. I mean, he will be you know, he will kind of be the center of the series, you
Okay.
know, for the animated, you know, adaptation. But in episode 2, he will be getting more fleshed out. You'll start to see the beginnings of it, and you know, hopefully I can get to episode 3 where he'll really get fleshed out. So
Dope. Dope. So what is it? There's 13 days left in the campaign.
I believe
Um
so.
what do we see as far as the rest of the year? How's that looking for you? Um Outside of this, I'm sure Trill League's, from what I looked at in the Kickstarter, is probably going to hit our hands probably around like September of this year. But
Yep.
aside from that, aside from us getting those books, what is the Anthony Piper doing for the rest of the year?
Oh man, I'm reworking Trill League. You know, I want to do the website just so it's easier for newcomers to kind of, you know, jump on board, because you know, once 50 had got involved, man, you know, I had a lot of, you know, new people just kind of wondering what this was. And so because it was something that kind of started on social media, so I
Mhm.
didn't really have any way, you know, I didn't have it's not organized in a way that, you know, newcomers can kind of, you know, jump in. Everything it is that I've built has just been kind of for people who have, you know, jumped in since the beginning of it. So I'm planning on revamping the website. I do have an NFT project that I am working on with a couple of other collaborators as well, which, you know, I kind of want to do some special edition stuff for that as well. You know, we pitching a series, and you know, hopefully we'll have some, you know, some good news that we can release about that. Um, I did a Jason Derulo project last year that I wrote.
Mhm.
I haven't heard anything about it, as far as I know it's completed. You know, I've talked to Jason. I'm not sure when they plan to release it. It seems like he has something bigger intended for it. So I think maybe, you know, they're kind of like postponing it to kind of build up some sort of hype behind it. So that may get released this year. Um, what else do I got in the works, man? Um, a lot of other little smaller projects, but I mean, most of the stuff is just most of the year is dedicated to Trill League right now. You know, just kind of building it back up, man, getting it ready for the animated adaptation, and just preparing it for, you know, new people who will just be learning about it from, you know, future announcements, you know, so they can just kind of get themselves inserted into it and kind of know what the story is, kind of get familiar with my story
Mhm.
as an artist, and you know how it is I created this thing, and you know my journey in Hollywood and stuff like that. Man, I've had a lot of people ask me, um, you know, kind of things it is that they need to do as artists and creators about, you know, how to navigate this industry, how to create, you know, a buzz and stuff like that. So that's another thing I want to start preparing, as well as just kind of, you know, um getting things organized as far as like questions, and the right questions I guess you should be asking is in terms of like young creators, as far as like, you know, how to navigate in this industry and things it is you should look out for.
Mhm. Now, if there's anything essential for this new generation of independent comic book creators to know when they're putting their Kickstarters together and basically trying to get the exposure needed for them to basically kind of gain a sense of popularity amongst their audience, how would you say would be the best way for them to go about it?
I mean, when you starting off as an artist, man, I mean, your audience is everything. You know, those are the people who are going to support you, man. Those are the people who are going to share your work. You know, those are the people who are going to be excited by the material that you drop. So, you know, I think the first thing it is that you need to do is, as an artist, you know, make clear what it is that you're trying to do with your career. You know what I'm saying? I think sometimes people get a little bit kind of ashamed and scared about putting their goals out there. And I think, you know, you should make it well known, you know, because people will get behind that, you know. People tend to support talent, you know, so if they see your talent shining through, you know, they'll lift you up, you know. So and be consistent with it, you know, like let people know that it is that you're trying to build something, you know. Sometimes I see a lot of artists or creators, you know, they'll have these concepts, you know, which, you know, they have the potential to be great.
Hmm.
However, they don't put that consistency in, you know, they don't, they might do something here and there. And I understand sometimes, life gets in the way, they got a 9 to 5 or whatnot.
Yeah.
However, people respond to that consistency, man, and if they see that you're trying to build something, they'll get behind it. So that's the most important thing, is just, showing your audience what it is that you want to create. I see a lot of these creators, they go in thinking that, they can amass money, to put out their creation, and they haven't cultivated an audience yet. And and unfortunately, that's just not how it works. You can have the dopest concept, you can have the dopest artwork behind it, but if you don't have an audience, it's gonna fall on deaf ears, because they're not interested in seeing it. Because I mean, the one thing that I think a lot of artists are afraid to speak on is that the art industry in general is very competitive. And you just have to accept that, there's a lot of creators out here pumping out content, and it's really good content. And the thing is you want to try to get eyes on whatever it is that you're creating. So, whatever it is that you're doing, man, I would say, try to make it the dopest thing it can be. Try to, present it very professionally. If you feel like maybe you're not the best artist, maybe you need to hire another artist. You know what I'm saying? Or, maybe if you just decide to draw it, really ugly, that could work to your advantage as well too. I mean, it's certain ways to go about it. I think people also need to, if you can get any sort of like books on marketing and study that stuff. Like, one of the things it is that I come from, like, I love marketing. And so I study cats like Phil Knight and Steve Jobs, and try to, study what makes you attracted to a product. What makes you want this particular product? How do they market it? You know what I'm saying? How do they put it out there? How do they present it and stuff like that? And I think once you can kind of get a grasp of that and understand that, you know what I'm saying, you can kind of imbue that into your product and how you present it,
It's true.
So.
Now, is there any current or recent indie comic projects that you've seen that you more so have been impressed by?
So I haven't had a chance to really get to deep dive into a lot of indie projects right now, man. But the one project that I am very impressed by, and I know people might say that I'm biased because the cat's from Chicago, but it's this cat named Geo Gant, and he he got a project called Beware of Toddler, man. And I seen this cat, he had, I forget his coffee one, because he had another web comic that he was doing on a barista, but this one, because he had his daughter, and so he did this comic called Beware a Toddler, man. And I kind of fell off of social media for a couple of years.
Yep.
But I was on around the time he created it, and he just recently ran a Kickstarter. And to watch like how consistent he's been with that project and how professional it looks, man, I'm like so impressed. I just actually purchased it Monday or Tuesday. But he did a Kickstarter. It was successful. It looks really good, man. And just to see it evolve. I got another homie named Loveless Melvin. He's actually a tattoo artist down in Atlanta, and he has this series called Loveless Cupid, and he's still working on it because he does his 9 to 5 as a tattoo artist. So he puts in the time he can on this series, but the concept is dope. Like, conceptually, what it is that he's creating is dope. It's one of those. Well, I ain't even gonna say that because I feel like, well, no, I'll put it out there. It's one of those series that if I make it in television, it's one of those things that I'm like, all right, I want to adapt this.
Got you.
Yeah, so those are two.
Okay, it's funny you said Geo Gant, because I'm actually he's actually going to be on the show next week.
Oh, really? Oh, okay, word. Yeah. Okay, that's dope. Okay, yeah.
So I got a chance to talk to him because, of course, he got nominated for a Ringo Award for Best Cartoonist. Like the fact that it's outside of the box. It's not, what I'm saying, regardless of comics are comics. You don't have to be superhero all the time. Sometimes you got people that deep dive into sci-fi. Some people dive into horror a lot. He's basically putting out a straight webtoon based on his daughter. Very comedic, super funny. And it's hitting because he puts it in your face every day.
Yep.
So it definitely works out on his behalf. I'll be happy to tell him that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. Yeah, let him know.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a chance to meet him when I went to I forget that con, man. Oh, C2E2.
Oh,
And I
okay.
had met him. Yeah, that was my first time meeting him, you know, because we have known each other since like 2007. You know, we just been networking with each other and stuff like that, but we had never actually met each other in person until that Comic-Con. And you know, I just been watching his hustle, man, and I'm just like, I'm super proud of him, you know, to watch somebody put that sort of consistency into, you know, their product and just not, you know, to see it evolve, you know, professionally, how he's presented it and stuff like that, but to also see him kind of reaping the rewards from it too,
Yeah.
you know, and achieving success from that, man. So, and everything it is that I just said, you know, correlates that consistency, man. You know, that's what people respond to. They respond to that consistency that you put behind a project, you know, and he's been working on that for like 3-4 years now, you know, and people are recognizing it. So
it's true, man.
yeah.
Well, Anthony, I appreciate you doing this with me. This was amazing. I look forward to basically, of course, getting Trill League episode 2 in my hands in September. But I look forward to seeing the future projects that you got going for you in the future, and definitely want to see Trill League get adapted and be on the screen for the first time.
I appreciate that, man. We gonna make it happen.
Absolutely. And when it does, we're gonna talk again.
Oh, for sure.
For sure, man. So from James Grandmaster Facts Boys, Anthony Piper with Trill League, we are out.